Hello, this is Lee, back once again for another video. And I just wanted to share a few thoughts about, a trend that's been going on for a little while. Actually, it's something that goes back to the 70s and 80s, more the 80s. Mini arcades. There's been this long, of course, trend of trying to profit from nostalgia. Nostalgia often doesn't quite get it right. There was some throwaway line in Back to the Future Part 2 where Doc Brown says, it's one of those nostalgia bars where it's, doesn't quite get everything right. Well, that's kind of how these mini arcades are. Back in the day, they had commercials talking about these little mini arcades, these little plastic molded little booths, like a miniaturized, Barbie doll-sized version of an arcade cabinet, Pac-Man or Frogger or Space Invaders, whatever it was, Centipede. And it looked really cool, especially to a child. You see that image and it's like, you got this arcade game and it's shrunk down. And you've got all the sounds and the lights and the colors, and you've got a little joystick and little buttons. It's fun. But years later, I never got any of those, but years later, I got to see them up close, got to see video footage of the actual gameplay, and really, all those were just kind of the precursors to like the little handheld Tiger LCD games, where they're just these static images, and they just kind of light up to give the, just crudest impression of movement. And don't get me wrong, there were some of those games that were quite fun. Some people have only heard of that stuff because of AVGN, but, Cinemassacre, but, I played those games growing up. I didn't have a Game Boy. Certainly Game Boy was a full-blown, game console. It was just black and white at first. But those handheld games, they were actually a more advanced version. Just black on a clear background with a little picture behind it of these old LED mini arcades. They had Donkey Kong and stuff, so you turn the lights off and this little, guy would run back and forth, but it's just solid color. Very primitive. Not full animation, just very choppy. So they didn't quite get it right back then. Technology's improved a vast amount, and they sell these little mini arcades. Some of them you just take your smartphone and you just jam it into this little box that has like an actual joystick, and you're playing a game on your phone, but instead of smashing the screen with your fingers, which is quite annoying, you have actual controls. And it's kind of cute, it's kind of funny, it's kind of a little gimmick, a little nostalgia tread. And a lot of them are emulated, so they can have, 100% accuracy to the arcade game from 1980 or whatever, whatever it might be. Well, they sell these mini arcades now, and I see them cropping up everywhere, and they get it wrong. Almost always. Almost always. I've seen very few that get it right, and what I mean by that is this. Let's say you walk into your favorite store, and you see a little nostalgia corner for grown-ups, and it's like Frogger. Oh, cool. I remember Frogger. Playing it in the arcade. What a fun game. Little frog trying to cross the road. And so you grab the little thing and you pay your $20. And guess what? It's not the arcade game. It's not even the Genesis version. It's the NES version. So an inferior port of the arcade game. So why don't they have a little mini TV with a Nintendo connected? That's what it should be. Instead, they give you an arcade booth, give you the impression this is the arcade game, that this is as good quality, to say, oh look, we're in the future now, so our little portable technologies are more advanced than the giant arcade machines of the past. Wrong! I mean, we do have better technology now, but not in these little portable things, and they're cheap, very cheaply made. They look cool on a shelf, and that's the main selling point, I think, is like, oh, look at this neat little thing, I'll put it next to my Funko bobblehead, and I'll be cool with my friends for 2 seconds. But I would rather get a game that works. If you're gonna sell me a game, at least give me a game that works. And here's something else I've noticed. So, let's use Pac-Man, or Ms. Pac-Man as an example. You got a mini arcade, looks pretty good. Got the side art, it's got the little screen, it's got the little joystick, but look at the screen for a second. Pac-Man had a vertical screen. Not a horizontal, not a square, but vertical. Higher on the top and bottom than on the sides. But what do we get? We get a square screen. That's because of the not the original arcade. And so you can see the maze, and then you've got like on the side like how many lives you got, or your over here rather, how your score, the little cherry showing the level you're on. That's not how the original game was. Same thing with Frogger. Most of these games are vertical screens, and here's the thing: you're making a dedicated mini cabinet for your game. So why not use the proper aspect ratio? This is like making a TV movie, a little mini TV that plays it in full frame. Why would you do that? Make it widescreen. You can do that, you know. Pac-Man. If you ever go to an arcade and look at an original Pac-Man machine, even many of the revamped anniversary Pac-Man machines, now if it's a a bootleg pirate board, it probably won't look right, but the original Pac-Man, the joystick is right in the center. There's just one little 4-way joystick right in the center, not an 8-way. It's not off to the side with a bunch of buttons. But on the mini cabinet, here's what they do: they put 2 buttons, like it's an NES thing, and then a joystick on the side. Actually, over here, joystick, 2 buttons. That's not how Pac-Man looks. Pac-Man is joystick in the center, and it's like a start button off to the side somewhere. And it's right in the center, and it's a vertical cabinet. There actually was a Pac-Man machine mini cabinet I saw, mini arcade, where it looked right. The joystick was right. The screen was even right, but guess what? It was just an LCD. Pac-Man just always faces one direction, moving around with the ghost monsters. And it was very disappointing. So the cabinet was right, but the game was like a Tiger handheld, very primitive. Then you get the full motion, Pac-Man. Of course, it's like NES Pac-Man, which was, Atari had the worst port, but the NES port wasn't very good either. Let's see, what was it? Not Namco, not Midway, but Tengen or Tengen. They had the best port of Ms. Pac-Man on the NES. It was very close to the arcade version, whereas the Namco version, it wouldn't be Bali Midway because that was the arcade, but the Namco port was basically just the original Pac-Man with just revised graphics, and the moving fruit and everything. Was a small maze. The characters were slightly too big for the maze, and the colors were wrong. It was not the best port. So you get an inferior port on the mini cabinet, and then you've got the joystick off to the side. And I see that with a lot of them, and it's always the same generic like ball type joystick. Some of these games didn't use that type. I mean, yes, you get the bat type joystick for like Street Fighter and stuff like that. Mortal Kombat actually more so. But some of these games, they had like flight sticks, or just different types of joysticks, different sizes. Just the attention to detail is lacking in these games. And there's an Asteroids game, and it's an LCD game. It's not, it's more like the stiff animation rather than, a full motion, like 8-bit type of game. And then you've got some slightly larger mini cabinets. You've got Rampage, but you can only be George. You can't be Lizzie. So it's even more scaled back from the NES version. What a joke! What a ripoff! And Double Dragon. Oh, Double Dragon. And now with Double Dragon, this is not a mini cabinet. It's a plug-and-play TV game. These are the other thing. It's like a little joystick or a controller, and it plugs into the TV, and it just plays that one game on the TV. And I've been saying this all along. If you're going to play a sprite-based, old-school video game, pre-PlayStation 2, pre-Dreamcast, you should play it on a CRT, a tube-style TV with the scanlines, so it looks right. You won't get this pixel art, weird, blurred effect like you will on an HD screen with HDMI. People obsess over that, but it's like, these games were designed for the old-style TVs. They look like cartoons. They didn't look like blocky little sculptures. They just look wrong on modern displays. So TV games, what a great idea. Plug it into your old TV and play it. Of course, once the controller breaks, you're out of luck, and you got to have batteries, or you got to have it plugged in. It's usually one player. Well, guess what? Double Dragon. It's one of those, and unfortunately, it's one player, and it's the NES version. So the NES version of Double Dragon was terrible. If you were a fan of the arcade version, the only good thing about it is that it had a versus mode. you could have two players, and you would pick a character, and you'd fight each other, like a early Street Fighter type of thing, but you could run all over the map, and sometimes you'd get weapons. It was kind of fun. It was a unique feature that you wouldn't see in other Double Dragon games. They knew that they were making an inferior port of the arcade game, so they said, oh, here's a new feature. Sega did this all the time. Nintendo did it sometimes. Here's where they did it. But why would you want to play one-player Double Dragon? And the NES Double Dragon was kind of inferior because you couldn't have two players at the same time in the adventure, the campaign, like in the arcade. You know, Billy and Jimmy Lee together, working together. Instead, it was just Billy. And if he died, then player 2 would have his chance to play as Billy. It's silly. So, an already inferior port of Double Dragon is even more inferior in the plug-and-play TV game. It's just absurd. I really think these things are bad, and here's the problem. People that don't remember these games, or maybe you never saw them before, someone is going to buy this for them as a gift, or maybe as someone who remembers the game vaguely, and they're going to play it and think, you know, nostalgia's a big joke. This game really wasn't that good. It was really primitive. Look how inferior it is. My memories are ruined. My childhood is destroyed. But here's the problem. They're getting an inferior copy, a pale imitation, a falsely advertised bootleg of the original. You know, it's just wrong. It's killing itself. Nostalgia is killing itself with these inferior products. So be discerning. If you're a fan of this stuff, and you do your research before you buy it, before you buy that Atari that has 100 million games on it, before you know, whether it's a licensed product or some kind of bootleg, check it out. Chances are it's not as good as the real thing, and chances are you'll actually save money if you buy the original. Not always, because of course nostalgia drives the prices up. People know they can sell these things for whatever they want online, because, oh, everybody wants an Atari. Ooh, Atari's fine. You want to play Atari on your CRT with, you know, one of those things, whatever. You're going to miss a lot of classic games, but you'll get most of the ones, you know. And if you're not too attached to it, you'll get your fill, probably. Genesis has come a long way. NES, pretty much. You know, you could buy an NES Classic. But here's the thing, you could buy an original NES in good working order and all of those games for a lot cheaper, actually. And you can buy these multi-carts that are not legal, not licensed, or better yet, you can buy these like EverDrive type, you know, and I'll maybe review those at some point, which can be perfectly legal. You only put in the ROMs of the games you actually have purchased, but you can have all your games on one cartridge if you want, on original hardware, or close enough, you know, hardware, recreated hardware, retro, duo, trio, whatever. And you don't have to buy this little classic device that is limited to those games, and you have to buy special controllers. And those NES controllers were terrible anyway. They killed my fingers as a child, and I just can't stand them as an adult. They're just annoying, really. And, you know, people have nostalgia for how they look, but they were terrible. They were awful. Even the original Famicom had better controllers. So nostalgia just isn't what it used to be, I guess. So that's what it is. I actually bought one of these mini arcades. I got myself actually an Oregon Trail one. It's quite good. Pretty close to the real thing. It looks like a little old Apple computer. Kind of fun. And I got myself a Galaga, I believe it was. Or was it Galaxian? You know, I'll have to look. See, obviously I haven't spent a lot of time with it yet, but, you know, something like that, that's a little closer to what it's supposed to be. But Pac-Man, it was just too inauthentic for me to want to buy it. Because, you know, you look at it for 2 seconds and you think, oh yeah, that reminds me of Pac-Man, but any version of Pac-Man reminds me of Pac-Man. If I want Pac-Man, I want the arcade game that started it all. If I want Ms. Pac-Man, I want the Ms. Pac-Man. And they could have just worked just a little bit harder, you know, and make me pay like $1 or $2 more, and it would have been worthwhile. Make it authentic. So when I see these things in the stores, I kind of, they're just not trying. They're just not trying hard enough. So try harder next time, guys, if you want my money. You know, who wouldn't want to own an 80s style arcade if you grew up in that era? But these mini arcades are just jokes. So there's my rant for the day. Enjoy. Until next time.